views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to writers and journalists and editors and filmmakers, photographers. In our second segment, we're going to talk to an author of a children's book, a Bronx author. You may know her from her artwork and her murals that are all over town. But that's for our second segment. For our first segment, we're going to put our serious hat on and say good evening to Yoav Gonen, who is the City Hall reporter for the city. Nice to have you with us, Yoav.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You wrote an article that cuts right to the core of what everybody's talking about in New York City, and that is about the mayor's blueprint to cure violence. And we're going to break that down a little bit. Listen, everybody knows what's going on here. 11-month-old child was shot. 2 cops were shot and killed, which is, no more or less horrific than an 11-month-old being shot. A gunman just the other day ran through Jacoby Hospital's emergency room, shooting people. I mean, it's insane already. Just before we break it down, what did you think of the mayor's address and the mayor's blueprint?
Well, I think every new mayor is gonna naturally want to put out their own vision for how they intend to handle public safety. I think in this case, what happened was this flurry of just horrible events, as you pointed out. There was also a teenage cashier who was killed, and there was also
there's hundreds of them. It's crazy.
Yeah,
it's insane.
Yeah, and those are the kind of things that happen every once in a while, but they all were just packed into the first few weeks of the administration. So I think they felt obligated to address, perhaps move up the date by which they put out the plan. And it's not a fully comprehensive plan. A blueprint is the right name for it. And they identified a range of methods that they intend to get a handle on gun crimes, including preventing them and also prosecuting them with the help of the DAs and federal officials.
It sounds like your reaction is like, well, talk is cheap. In other words, do it. Now you've got to roll it out. I was thinking, which we talk about in the Bronx all the time, we have many groups in the Bronx that, if you put them all together that are fighting gun violence, you'd really have something. But because, this one's here, this one's here, this one works in this neighborhood, this one works out at Jacoby Hospital, it's very hard to get them together. That kind of leadership that doesn't cost a lot of money, it just costs organization. I thought that's the kind of thing they can actually accomplish.
Yeah, and I think Adams has been good on bringing the groups that are already doing this work to the table. That includes some of the crisis management and cure violence groups that have started to look at this issue from a preventative measure to intervene before disputes rise to the level of violence. And he was quite forceful in a roundtable a few days before he released the blueprint, but also in the blueprint, he made it clear he wants to make the work of those groups a central pillar in tackling this.
I had an interesting thought because in theory, based on what he laid out, the Guardian Angels would be one of those groups that takes a real interest in quelling violence. And he kind of talked about some of the moving around the trains. How ironic that the leader of the Guardian Angels was the guy he defeated in the mayoral election. I thought that was kind of an interesting side note. One of the things that advocates in the Bronx have been talking about for years, generations practically, is summer youth employment. And he talked about, putting money and widening the idea of summer youth employment, get the kids off the streets, give them something productive to work on. My question is, and maybe you have a thought about this, in order to do that, it's one thing, you need money. And is it the kind of a thing you think that right now the new city council is going to be ready to say, you know what, we'll back the mayor up on this and we'll really put some teeth, literally green dollars into summer youth employment and other programs like it, workforce development, and things like that?
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like for one thing, that this council is by many assessments further left than prior councils, and it was usually in my recollection, it was usually the council members who were always advocating for more seats for the summer youth employment, and it was always the mayor having to be the one to say, we have too many needs and it's too expensive. But the program did expand at times under de Blasio. It is usually the city that picks up the cost. And so I think the council is going to be lockstep with the mayor on expanding the number of seats for summer youth as high as they can afford to.
Yeah, I've been a big advocate for it, so I'm all in favor of that. I'm curious about this, and this is a hard thing to measure. The other day, the governor said, because she was challenged on bail reform, and she said, I'd like to see hard data showing exactly how many people who had been arrested, who've been let out on the streets, commit further crimes, because I guess none of us can forget the fact that if somebody is innocent till proven guilty, it's really the wrong thing to do to incarcerate them for even a year, or, we know what happened to Khalif Browder at that time. So what are your thoughts about the idea of bail reform? Is this the kind of thing to move the state legislature so they change the rules, give judges more discretion and all that kind of thing?
Well, I think you're right that everyone wants to see the data. You have to be able to point to specific cases and say that if the bail laws were different, if judges had the discretion to incarcerate somebody because of perceived danger, which is what Adams is advocating for, and by the way, Mayor de Blasio also advocated for that, but you have to be able to point to specific cases where that would have made a difference. And I think that's what's been lacking from the side of the advocates who want the bail reform amended again to bring it back a little bit.
You're around City Hall often enough. Do you have the sense that because the mayor has been very hesitant to criticize the Manhattan DA, who really threw some things against the wall that I don't know if they didn't stick for a lot of the population. Do you have the sense that maybe the mayor at some point is going to say, hey, Alvin, let's cut back here, or let's not be so serious about this. We got a big crime problem, and image-wise, you're not even helping.
I think the mayor is going to try to use as much of his influence as he can to steer Bragg toward his purview, toward his view on how to handle crime. The governor also had a meeting with the district attorney, and I think people are going to try to sway him as much as they can. But he has also indicated that he's susceptible to kind of public pressure and public opinion, and he has, if not walked back, he's at least reframed some of the ways that he's talking about the crimes that he will and doesn't intend to prosecute.
We will see how that plays itself out. I've had some conversations with some people on the inside, and they're like, the way it was presented was probably, in this very volatile climate, probably a big mistake. One of the things that I didn't hear him talk a lot about, I don't think it was in your article, is the notion of the iron pipeline. If we keep flooding the streets with guns, I mean, to some degree, yeah, we can do the best we can to help our kids do better and be productive, but that's going to become a problem. I mean, in the long run, the guns are there, and anybody who's a little bit off or inclined to, instead of just trying to beat somebody up, is going to have a gun that makes them incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, what makes me a little bit, I don't know if skeptical is the right word, but we had a mayor who was a billionaire in Michael Bloomberg, and he was one of the prime advocates of gun safety, gun control, and
right,
he also made every effort to stop the flow of guns. And I don't know how successful those efforts were, but perhaps
I think we're seeing evidence of how successful those. Yeah. Unfortunately,
I don't know how how closely aligned the city was with the federal government at the time, or with the state government. Perhaps if everyone is on the same page, perhaps that would make the difference. But there have been prior efforts to tackle this, and they don't seem to have done much.
Well, I think if you don't get federal legislation, you don't get people behind it, and the federal government, because these are commerce that crosses state lines, we're not going to get anywhere. Maybe that's why the mayor didn't make any glowing promises about closing the iron pipeline. Anyway, we are almost out of time, Yoav. We're talking to Yoav Gonen from the city. What's going on in City Hall? What'd you work on today? We're shooting this on the Monday before the Thursday it's going to air, but just give us a little insight. What's going on down there today?
Well, I was the mayor made some announcements related to climate policy. One of my colleagues was reporting on that, but we're still looking at who's going to fill out the remainder of the administration. There's still some high-profile commissioners that haven't been named, and we're interested, to see who the full team that Adams intends to bring on are. So we're kind of focusing on that for the time being.
I'll tell you one Bronx name that came up was Adolfo Carrion. It looks like he's going to be the HPD commissioner. Now that's interesting because in his post borough presidency, he worked, in the private sector. It will be interesting to see how well he understands it from the public sector's side. In this case, of course, he did work out in the White House. Anyway, Yoav Gonen, thank you so much. We hope we advise everybody to check out the city, and we are always going to continue to look for your work in the city, and we appreciate your time with us this evening. And keep writing about the Bronx. We love having you.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Great. Okay, Yoav Gonen from the city. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Laura Alvarez, great Bronx artist, and it's not a mural this time. She's got a children's book, so we'll do that right after this. Don't go away. Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. I am thrilled because one of my Bronx buddies is here. She's a tremendous artist. And so let's just get right to it and say hello to Laura Alvarez. Nice to see you again, Laura.
Nice to see you too. Thank you for having me.
This is very exciting. I know you've got the new book and everything else. We're going to talk about the children's book, but I do want to talk about so people will know who you are. You know that I know that you've been a wonderful muralist in the Bronx. Let's see, you did that's over there in High Bridge, the
Yes.
steps in High Bridge, and also you did some a beautiful mural in Norwood. Talk to me about you learning artwork and beginning painting and doing some of these wonderful things in the Bronx.
Well, I did artwork since forever, but I did study fine arts in Spain and in England. And after that, I really wasn't much into art. That's weird, but I found graphic design. So I did graphic design for many years until I came to New York in 2009. And then I was like, I don't know if I want to do graphic design or maybe I can do something else. And I ended up going more into illustration, into art, into murals. And that's how it happened.
Do you have a preference? I mean, do you say, oh, this is what I really love? Or any time that you are expressing yourself visually, you feel okay?
I think each thing that I want to express, it might need a different technique. So I switch techniques as I feel that it fits better. Because I love illustration, and that's the easiest thing to do with a pad or pencil. That's it. Or
Right.
even like when I'm taking notes, I'm like literally drawing. But then if you want to reach more people, you want to take your art out of the studio. You want to do murals or like now a children's book with illustration.
There we go. And unlike others who write children's books, they didn't have to find an illustrator because you were a ready-made illustrator. Talk to me about Eggy's adventure. You've got a copy of the book. We're going to show some pictures of it. There it is, Eggy's Adventures at Powell Cottage. So this is
Yes.
definitely a Bronx book. Tell me about the beginning of it. Is it something you woke up one day and said, I ought to do this? Or
No.
tell me a little bit about this.
I actually didn't feel that I could write anything at all. And when I was working at with the visitor center at the Powell Park, and we had this, she used to teach writing classes, like
Right.
it was like short stories and fiction, and she kept telling me that I should write a children's book, and I'm like, I cannot write anything. Like this is not gonna happen. I have a lot of ideas in my head, but they don't really come out as stories. And she kept pushing and pushing. I'm like, okay, I'll try something. And that's when I wrote the beginning of the book, and she really helped me develop that story and the character. And I ended up having a book because that's what I wanted to do. It ideally, like before I even met her.
Right.
Yeah, and I ended up having a dummy. That's the sketchbook that you make all the drawings and all the pages on the book.
Right.
And I just left it in the shelf.
And you left it in the shelf. You didn't do anything with it. At what point did you what made you pick it up and say, hey, maybe I ought to do something?
You know, I always thought, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it. I'm going to finish some of the drawings, and I'm going to try to find a publisher. And that's the way I'm going to go with it. But years kept passing by, and
years. I was thinking a couple of weeks, but no, years.
Oh,
so
no.
This really has been a lifetime of putting this
This
together.
is like 7 years in the making.
And that's something.
and like I'll get to it, but I wasn't getting to it. So I know myself. I know as an artist, I can do a lot of things, but I'm very dispersed. Like I can focus in just one thing. So I was like, okay, let me see, how can I make this happen? And I decided to apply for one of the grants for the Bronx Council on the Arts. For new work, it's called that grant. And I was like, okay, it's the pandemic, so I have some time, more than usual regular time. I can work on the illustrations, I can work on this, and I can probably self-publish the book and just like do a short run. But I got the grant, and then I was thinking, why would I do a short run? Why can't I just go
Why don't
all
you
in?
really do it? And so
Yeah.
there must be, I mean, it's easy for us to say, well, she held up the book and all that, but there must be great pride in having that in your hands because you
Yes.
actually worked for years. Now we've learned all the
Yeah.
way through. So this idea of Eggy is
Mhm.
talk about Eggy, and the other part of it is you really are urging people to go to Poe Cottage, take
Yeah.
the kids and go see it. So just talk to me about the creation of the character and Eggy's big adventure going to Poe Cottage.
Yeah. So when I was working at the visitor center right across Poe Cottage, it was like pretty interesting. I love looking at animals, and that they are a big part of my artwork, animals and nature and plants. So when I was working there, I used to see all these squirrels, and I realized it was like these little black squirrels that I used to love, and how they will go in to find the nuts and then hide them and then take them out, and all that process they go through. And I was thinking how cute it would be that the great grandfather of one of these squirrels was the best friends of Edgar Allan Poe.
There
and,
you go. There
and
you
that's how
go.
it started.
And so you kind of made it a person. You kind of personalized it, and uh, for you, Poe Cottage. Now, I wasn't aware that you had been working at the visitor center over there. Just talk to me about why you think this is a worthwhile place for children or really anybody to visit.
I think there's a lot of like gems in the Bronx that a lot of people
Hmm.
don't know of.
Boy, is that
And
ever true?
yes, and
Yeah,
people walking by every day, living across the street from Poe Cottage, they don't know that's a museum. They don't know Edgar Allan Poe lived there. They don't know Edgar Allan Poe lived in the Bronx. And there's so many things that you can learn from learning that he was there. The Batman was born because Edgar Allan Poe was there, and
that's
and
right.
and it was born because of all that connection with the darkness and the city. So it's like so many things that are like intertwined that you can come out with, like just knowing that is there and that the museum is there, you can visit.
Have you had children go through the book now and said, "Oh wow, isn't that cute?" And get some reactions from children at this point yet?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
look at her
Because
smile. That
yeah,
lit you up there.
because
That's
I did
great.
send all my. I ended up also doing a Kickstarter because self-publishing a book is really expensive. So I did send out all the books already to the Kickstarter funders, and a lot of other ones that they have ordered online too. And it's been pretty amazing getting all those pictures of the kids looking at the books and
Well, that's
reading
fantastic.
it or making like they're reading it.
I'm always interested in people from outside the Bronx. Were these only Bronx children or people from children from all over?
all over,
Oh,
all
isn't that
over.
wonderful?
Yes.
So
Yes,
you,
a lot of people that has been in the Bronx, so that they know or they like Edgar Allan
that's
Poe, and
great.
they feel that it's really cool to introduce them to the kids, like somehow.
Well,
So
for kids, let's just say maybe even older children who, might not, this book might not be appropriate for them, but they read Edgar Allan Poe stories or poems or anything, that he's done, and then never knew that he came from here and he had lived here. And so, you're doing a great job in promoting the Bronx along the way. One of the other things that occurred to me as soon as I saw it and read through it, of Eggy moving through and promoting Poe Cottage, Eggy then now becomes a character you can apply to other places. I mean, you could take, if you're talking Bronx, you could take him to the botanical gardens. You could take Eggy to the zoo, right? I mean, am I now giving you something that you already knew?
I have a whole I have a whole series of books already planned in my head.
Wow, isn't
I
that
just need
wonderful?
somebody to publish them for me.
Oh, there you go. Well, maybe you make a couple of dollars. Listen, I was just talking with another Bronx author, who told me if I get lucky, my book will be banned in Tennessee, and then all of a sudden everybody will buy it. That's what's going on. Let me ask you this: how long did it take you to make those pictures? I mean, I realize you spent a lot of time on all kinds of artwork. But did the book itself take you longer because you were telling a story as opposed to, the mural that you put up in Norwood or the streets that you drew and then you're just painting it out? So
it's
just talk to
different.
me about that.
Yeah, it's different. I did have the idea of the images I wanted to create, like kind of the sketches. When I started in June, I got the grant, and then in July I started like thinking, okay, I really need to work on this. I started like working on different Eggies and different ways of using the illustration. Did I want to do it digital? Did I want to do like more graphic or less, or with? It's a whole story that you go through your head, and it's like, okay, I need to figure it out. I need to decide, because I could have gone in many ways, more like with more lines or less lines. I went with more texture and more like if it was cutouts. But it's like, it's all decisions that you have to make, and it's like, okay,
Right.
I'm going with this. And it took me literally 2 months to do all the illustrations, and I did all the marketing, like all
Right.
the book putting together and everything.
We're almost out of time. Do you paint or draw every day, or
Oh,
is it you do? Even if it's just a private thing and you're not working on anything, you just have to. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm always interested in, which we've talked about, not you and me, but on this program for years, in an artist's muse, what inspires them. But it sounds to me like you just have to keep creating every single day. Anyway, all right. So the book is Eggy's Adventure. Hold it up again. Oh, there we go. Eggy's Adventures at Powell Cottage, from Laura Alvarez Fernandez. And she talks a little bit, it makes a little personal statement there. And the next book is coming out when? It's too early to say.
When I get the money. No, the next book is the next book is the bilingual edition, though. It's going to be Spanish and English.
Oh, that sounds like it'll really appeal to Bronx kids. I love that. Anyway, Laura Alvarez, congratulations. It's a wonderful thing, not only for you to be able to put it out, but to help promote our borough, our beautiful, wonderful borough. It's a great thing. Thank you so much. And thank you also to Yoav Gonen, who joined us from the city earlier in the program. And that'll do it for the Bronx Buzz. Next week, I don't know, we'll do some more. Actually, we're going to talk to a writer who writes about environmental issues. And then in our second segment, talk about the great Bronx River Arts Center, which is one of the great places in our borough. So that's it. Maybe Eggy will go over to BRAC, to the Bronx River Arts Center one day. Good night.